We are very honored to be hosting Major General Gregg F. Martin, PhD, U.S. Army retired. He is a 36-year combat veteran who led more than 10K soldiers in the Iraq War, a bipolar survivor and thriver, a mental wellness warrior. He is an Airborne-Ranger-Combat Engineer and Army Strategist. He led a combat engineer platoon, company, battalion, and brigade, and was commanding general of the Fort Leonard Wood and the Army Corps of Engineer Northwest Division, commandant, commandant
Commandant.
of the Army Engineer School and the Army War College, and president of the National Defense University. A graduate of West Point, he holds a PhD and two master's degrees from MIT and master's degrees from both the Army and Naval War Colleges. He lived unknowingly on the bipolar spectrum his whole life, which mostly helped him until he rocketed into full-blown mania and terrifying psychosis, then crashed into crippling depression along with PTSD and moral injury, a devastating combination which almost killed him. His life's mission and purpose is sharing his bipolar story to help stop stigma, promote recovery, and save lives. His wife, Maggie, is an Army brat, Army wife, and Army mom to three sons, two of whom are Army Special Forces veterans, and one a starving artist. Martin is also the father of two sons who live with bipolar disorder, which makes for a fantastic family support team. Martin is the author of Bipolar General, My Forever War with Mental Illness, a recognized leader in mental health and bipolar disorder. He is an expert by lived experience in the bipolaractionnetwork.org and a leading character in Brainstorm, the film, a new documentary on bipolar disorder that will air on PBS. For more, please go to his website, bipolargeneral.com. He is also grateful and proud to be an IBPF and NAMI ambassador and advisor to Dragonfly Mental Health. With all of that, thank you so much, General Gregg. Thank you for your service both in the armed forces and for being a bipolar advocate.
Well, thank you, Caroline. It's really an honor. It's great to be on. I appreciate you reaching out. And feel free to just call me Greg,
Oh,
or you don't have to call me General, or my nickname, which is Martino.
Martino. All
Just
right.
feel free.
Well, thank you so much for being here. For everyone here who's meeting you for the first time, we heard a little bit about you. But how would you introduce yourself after everything you've been through today?
First, I'm really grateful to be alive and have a awesome life of meaning and purpose and a great wife and family. So I think grateful is the first word. I had a super successful Army career. I was really fortunate with the talents that, I was given to be a successful student, athlete, leader, all the way through the Army. Everything was great. Unknowingly, I had bipolar disorder, which didn't really emerge in a negative way until probably when I was in my late 40s. Um, up until, for the most part, my living on the bipolar spectrum, it helped me until it didn't. And then when it didn't, it just skyrocketed out of control. It was a devastating crisis that ended my career. It could have easily taken my life with the condition that I was in. It really, really was awful. And in my book, I describe it as a couple of years of bipolar hell. Um, and so the great news, though, is that I was able to get a accurate diagnosis of bipolar type 1 with psychosis and some other stuff, but bipolar being the big one. Got a diagnosis, took a couple years to get the medications working, the right meds, but once I did, and it was 10 years ago, I came out of the hospital. I started taking lithium and lamictal together. That was the right combo for me. And I'm fortunate that my body can, accept the lithium because a lot of people can't. So I feel really fortunate. But the combination of those meds and then learning about bipolar disorder, developing a strategy, a battle plan for day-to-day recovery over the last 10 years, and then just working hard at it with great support, family, friends, medical people, etc. I've had really a miraculous rebirth of my life. I feel like, Marcus Aurelius gave some great advice 2,000 years ago. He said, imagine that you died and then you're going to really live a great life and make your life count for the rest of your life every day. And that's kind of where I'm at. It's so I mean, amazing recovery, and I've got this whole new purpose in life, which is, sharing my bipolar story and all the lessons learned and everything that goes with, what we all deal with. And so I speak, write, confer, advise. I'm involved with a whole bunch of different organizations, have met the most wonderful people in the world in the bipolar mental health community. And I would say I'm living my best life. So that's how I would describe myself.
That's lovely. I'm so glad to hear that you're in a good place. You have such positive energy. It's infectious. You've talked about in the past and in your book about having a hyperthymic personality. Can you explain what that is and how you experienced it?
Yes. I never heard of hyperthymia until several years ago. But what hyperthymia is, it's one of several different uh, personality or mood types that are your underlying baseline foundation for your mind, your personality. Hyperthymia is essentially a near continuous low level mania. A simple way to describe it is we all know what hypomania is, which is episodes of, mild to modest mania. So hyperthymia is different. It's almost like a continuous level of hypomania. And like I have that for sure. And it's been verified by my psychiatrist, who has a little test that he gives for it. But if you have it, it's really a blessing in many ways, except we know that it often leads into higher levels of mania and real diagnosable bipolar disorder. So anyway, that's what I have. Huge advantage. All my life, I now realize from high school on, I had it. I have it today, which you probably you see in my personality, but it gives me extra energy, drive, enthusiasm, extroversion, creativity, all those wonderful qualities I feel really blessed to have. So the other elements of the mood types are, so there's hyperthymia, which is, constant mania, low level mania. Then there's dysthymia, which is a consistent, mild depression. Then there's euthymia, which is sort of steady state right down the middle. And then there's cyclothymia, which is kind of a continuous mild bipolar disorder. What's really interesting is this stuff, other than cyclothymia, I don't think the others are even mentioned in the DSM. Um, I couldn't find it. Most psychiatrists don't know about it. They don't talk about it. The only people I've heard really talk about it are kind of very elite level researchers like in ISBD, the International Society of Bipolar Disorders, which is really, I mean, kind of the leading scientific organization for bipolar. I mean, they all know about it. That's like common knowledge. But most psychiatrists, I haven't found any who know about it. Um, what's interesting is apparently it was taught and was fundamental to being a psychiatrist for about 100 years. Apparently, it was well understood. It was taught. It was taught in med school. But somewhere around like 1980 or so, they changed the DSM all around, and they didn't stop teaching it in most med schools. Really interesting. But here's where I heard about it. There's a fabulous book called A First Rate Madness. Uncovering the Links Between Leadership and Mental Illness by a really famous psychiatrist, Nasir Gami, who teaches at Harvard Med School. Anyway, it's a fabulous book, super interesting. So I started reading it, and when I read, they had a whole piece on hyperthymia, and the two guys that they analyzed were John F. Kennedy and Franklin Roosevelt, two presidents. And when I read about them, I really felt like I was reading about myself. I was like, oh my gosh, he's talking about me. And I felt the same way in the bipolar chapters. But anyway, that's my understanding and knowledge of hyperthymia.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think it's something that I certainly didn't know about it. So the fact that you've spoken openly about it is definitely something that I thought would be valuable to share with everyone. So thank you for giving that overview. Let me see here. You went on to have a remarkably high achieving career, 36 years in uniform, rising to Major General. Could you share a bit of your career journey with us?
Sure. So I applied for all the service academies because, my family didn't have much money. They really pushed education, and the service academies are phenomenal. And my mom had two brothers that went to one of the academies. And so anyway, I applied to all of them. And the only one I got into was West Point. And that was my last choice because I was like, man, I don't really want to go in the Army coming after Vietnam. And, the Vietnam War had just ended, the draft ended. But it was such a great opportunity that I took it. And, because you get 100% full scholarship and you get a great education, but then you have to serve 5 years in the Army as payback to the taxpayers for this free education. Um, so anyway, I went to West Point, didn't like it at first, kind of got more and more into it, but it was really perfect for me. I love the academics. The leadership was great, sports, physical fitness. It was really cool. And then I owed my 5 years out in the Army, and I said, okay, after I do my 5 years, I'm out. I am going to become a civilian, and just like live the American dream. But what happened to me was once I got out in the Army and my first assignment, like after I went to airborne school and ranger school and all the kind of hoo-ha stuff, I went to Germany and I was a platoon leader of 30 combat engineers during the Cold War in West Germany. I fell in love with the Army. The troops were, I mean, it was rough. It was, uh, it was not spit and polish like West Point. It was the real deal, and I loved it. And it opened. It was people have a hard time believing this, but for me, the Army opened up a whole world of creative, positive, inventive leadership where I could really get to know my troops and their families and then assess this mission that we had. And I had the freedom as a lieutenant, as an Army officer, to innovate, create, craft, come up with really cool, fun, challenging, exciting ways to do our job and go after the mission. And I just said, man, this is awesome. And I went from platoon leader of 30 guys to company commander of about 150. Then the next thing you know, the Army said, hey, Greg, you're really successful. We want to send you to graduate school. Next thing I'm at MIT getting advanced degrees. And then my career just took off. I just kept getting promoted, advanced, awesome jobs. And so made it I mean, pretty much my whole adult life until 10 years ago, I was in the US Army.
Oh, that's incredible. And I appreciate that, you went into it expecting one thing and then you opened it up to different skills and different parts of yourself that you learned about through that.
Yes. And I will tell you, I think, again, going back to our earlier conversation, I think the fact that I have a bipolar brain was living on the spectrum. I mean, I was kind of different than most of the other my peers, other people in the Army, and people, the thing about the military, the Army, people think, oh man, it must be everything, lined up straight and everybody takes orders and does everything the same way. And I mean, there certainly is a certain amount of discipline and regimentation and organization. That's absolutely true. But with the Army is this vast ecosystem of different cultures and organizations and people and types of jobs. And I think my bipolar brain was able to look at and understand this amazing ecosystem and navigate and create pathways that nobody else really hardly thought about. I think it helped really give me an edge over my peers. I mean, I was, noticeably more successful, um, was able to achieve the mission better, take better care of my troops, have higher morale than, my peers did who didn't have like the bipolar brain. I think it really helped me a lot. And then as I went higher in rank from the tactical to the strategic level, like as a general, I mean, I was actually noted to be like one of the absolute most creative, transformational, visionary leaders in like the whole US military. And that's why I ended up getting picked to be the president of the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. And so the four stars and the top people, they recognized that, they saw it. Nobody knew I had bipolar disorder, including me. But what they were seeing were the positive aspects of that bipolar brain.
Yes, absolutely. Um, You've been candid, as you've sort of mentioned here, about what you'd call symptoms were actually assets. You mentioned a little bit how that looks in practice, and also, how work impacts your mental health. Can you speak a little bit about how that impacted your mental health in that way?
Yes. Um, so the Army was a great career for me. It was a great fit. Um, the structure, the rules, the process, the all of that stuff in Army military life, I think really was a help to me. What it did is it gave me guardrails, structure. Um, it gave me, you guys know about social rhythm therapy, which is it's super important for anybody, but especially someone with a mental health issue or bipolar disorder. Essentially, what the U.S. Army gave me was social rhythm therapy on steroids every day of my life from the age of 18 when I entered West Point. It was really beneficial. Where the Army and work hurt me was later in my career. I would say maybe in my early 40s. So I'd probably been in the Army about 20 years. And as I moved up higher in rank, the duties, responsibilities, the stress, the pressure, the responsibility got higher and higher. And I think in Caroline, I shared that mood chart with you where the lines started to really go up and down. Were in my early 40s when I was in a higher level job, battalion command, in charge of about 500 troops. So at that point, and then for the rest of my time in the Army, the next 2 decades, I believe that the job exacerbated and elevated my level of bipolar disorder. It started pushing me into more and more higher and higher levels of mania. And then I now realize I was in a mixed state for a lot of that time. Like a lot of these lines going up and down, they were actually mixed states where I was, almost whipsawing between mania and depression. So once we got out to that point on the chart in the where I was in my 40s and you start seeing the lines going, more dynamically up and down. I would say the job hurt me and made my bipolar condition worse. And then there was a huge trigger point in the Iraq War in 2003, 2004, when I was a brigade commander in charge of about 10,000 troops. The stress, the pressure, the intensity, the trauma, everything that went with that war experience um, really shot the mania up. And then that was followed by a deep depression. And then it just started getting higher highs, lower lows for about the next 10 years until I went into full blown mania and, the whole crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. This chart is so helpful as well. I shared it on the screen for everybody to take a look at. And you talked about, this is such a great illustration of where you were at different points. In those earlier phases, what were those earliest signs looking back that something was not right, even before you had language for it?
So the chart, really creating the chart and then reading and learning more and more about bipolar disorder and having discussions with very, very smart psychiatrists and psychologists. Um, I, I now think, I had the hyperthymic personality, the hyperthymia from teenage years on. Um, I didn't think it was a big deal at the time, but going back to 1975 in college, I went into a serious depression. And I think it was triggered by environmental conditions of going away to college, going from, sort of high school hero to college zero, and, all that goes with going away to college. But I now realize that I then also spiked into um, some hypomania following that depression. And then another thing that I didn't realize at the time, but I do now, was you can see that rise on the chart when I was at MIT in like 1986 to 88. Um, I mean, it was remarkable. I mean, I went there, the Army gave me the mission to get one master's degree in engineering, and they sent me to MIT for 2 years. I was on an amazing, high performing hypomanic surge where I got two masters. And then over a short order, the next couple of years, I finished the PhD. Um, that really wasn't normal human behavior. And I mean, I think I'm pretty smart, but not that smart. And looking back, I really think it was a surge into some kind of very high level hypomania, high performing. I mean, I was just on fire. My brain was working at a level that was amazing. And like, just as an example, the two department chairs of the master's programs, they both independently pulled me into their office and said, "Hey, Greg, we want you to go for a PhD. Your performance is exemplary, super creative, et cetera, et cetera." And I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. I mean, I got that my highest degree I ever wanted was a bachelor's degree. Now I have two master's degree. Forget the PhD. And they wouldn't take no for an answer. And I don't think it was really about me as much as it was my brain elevated to this kind of superhuman level, and they recognized it. They had no idea that I was manic, that I had bipolar disorder, but I think looking back now, those were early indicators of my condition.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody who's gone on to get quite a few degrees. That's sometimes, getting excited about new information that can definitely look positive at the beginning, and then towards you're going on with it, um, start to highlight some challenges. Which leads me a bit into my next question is you write openly in your book about the crisis that became your turning point. Could you walk us through, in whatever way feels right to you, how that looked?
Yes. Uh, so from the chart, you could see that from my early 40s on, I started to go into more and more levels of, unknown, unrecognized, undiagnosed, but what I now think was, some very high hypomania or some level of mania. But again, high performing. But I also realized that I was diving into depression almost every day, every week. The depressions, thankfully, were short, and I was able to bounce back out of them. And I had coping mechanisms, and I didn't know it was depression. I didn't know what it was. It just was happening. And the Iraq thing, the Iraq War was a unique experience where I literally felt when we attacked from Kuwait into Iraq, and the combat engineers were, truly like the lead element of the attack on the ground. I elevated into this state where I felt like I was Superman. My brain felt like a supercomputer. I was able to anticipate and solve problems on the battlefield before anybody else knew there was a problem. I really didn't feel fear. And then I started going, certain things triggered me into a rage. So anyway, that was a point in my life that was really an inflection point, and you can see it on the chart. Then I fell into terrible depression when I redeployed. Then it went higher and higher until I was president of National Defense University in 2014, and I just shot into, what is full-blown mania. And if you look at the DSM and the criteria for, diagnosis of bipolar and mania, I had every single thing except one, which is an unbelievable blessing. The only thing that I didn't have on that list of, grandiosity, spending money, unbelievable energy, talking faster and faster, religiosity. The only thing that didn't hit me was the hypersexuality and, doing, doing that, which thankfully that ends a lot of people's marriages and families and stuff like that. So I feel really fortunate. So I shot into full-blown mania. Um, People for the first time started looking at me in a different way. Prior to the full-blown mania, people saw me and they said, wow, this guy has so much energy, so creative, dynamic, loves people, all positive stuff. But when I went into full-blown mania, they said, like, wow, it's all of that, but this is not normal. There's something going on here. His ideas are too out there. They're too wild. He's going too fast. Um, and so what people did is how do you go to the boss and say, hey, we think you may have like a real, mental illness or psychological issue and you need help. I mean, people just can't do that. It's too hard, like in the military or any hierarchical organization, business, government, whatever. So I think they did what they thought was the right thing to do, which was recognize a problem. And they started writing, students, faculty, administrators, anonymous letters to my boss, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's the highest military officer in the country, answers to the president. And they detailed my behavior. And so my boss took this in. He's like, wow, like what's going on with Greg? And he did a very I think an unbiased, professional, objective assessment. He brought in three senior leaders who I had worked with. We had a good relationship. We trusted each other. And he gave them the mission. Okay, go over to National Defense University, find out what's going on, talk to the students, the faculty, the administration, talk to Greg, come back to me and give me your assessment. And so they did. And and they came back and said, hey, we love General Martin. He's a great guy, but there's something happening. We don't know what it is. We think he needs to get a mental health evaluation. We do not think it's healthy for him or his family or the university to keep him in place, our recommendation is that you remove him from command and, order him to go get a psychiatric evaluation, which he did. And I can tell you in a couple minutes the story of, getting fired by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which I'm happy to do. But that's kind of how it went down. So I was fired, ordered to get a psychiatric evaluation. Let's see, forced to into retirement earlier than I would have been, and that was pretty much it.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing so openly. That must have been so challenging. Uh,
Okay, so for you and the listening audience, can I just tell you, like, this is a really cool story that I love telling to military audiences. So, okay, real quick, I'll give you the abbreviated version. So, I'm two-star president of National Defense University. I get a call a Friday afternoon, and this was 12 years ago. And they said, okay, the chairman wants you to report to him to see him Monday morning at 10 o'clock. And I said, oh, okay, great. What's this for? And they said, you'll find out when you get here. And so in my manic brain, I thought, oh man, I'm going to get promoted. They're going to elevate me because that's the way my brain was working. So I go to his office, and I had known the chairman for years and years. We'd served together like four different times, and he was a great guy. Love him to death. He actually wrote the foreword to my book, which was really cool. And so I report into the chairman in the Pentagon, and I go into his office, and in the corner of my eye, I see his lawyer back in a corner. I'm like, oh, no promotion today. Because the only reason the lawyer would be there is for something bad. And so General Dempsey comes across his office, and he gives me a hug, and he said, Greg, I love you like a brother. You've done an unbelievable job. I give you a grade of A plus. Nobody could have transformed the university the way you did in just 2 years. But your time at NDU is over. You have until 5 p.m. today to resign, or I will fire you. And I'm ordering you to get a psychiatric evaluation this week at Walter Reed, the big military hospital. He said, what are your questions? I said, sir, no questions. Thank you. And I gave him a big hug and said, Chairman, God put me here to do big things. Now he's going to put me somewhere else to do even bigger things. And General Dempsey is like, his eyes are wide open, looking at me like, oh my gosh, what is going on with this guy? But here at Caroline, it's unbelievable. So that was 12 years ago. I was 100% right, because the work I'm doing now as a bipolar mental health advocate, I think is the most important job and mission I have ever had.
Yeah, and what I said off the top, thank you for your service, both military and for this too. That leads me a bit to the next part of your story, which is, with your recovery story. How did that look? You've talked about how staying well is really important for continuing to do the work that you do. What does that look like day to day for you now?
That's such a great question. So I was fired 2014, 12 years ago, in full-blown mania. I then spiraled and crashed into just crippling depression that lasted about 2 years. Plus, I had terrifying psychosis, just awful, horrible um, experiences of my own death, really ugly, horrible death and dying continuously. Um, so the good news, though, is I was fired in July. In November, I got the diagnosis bipolar 1 with psychosis plus PTSD and some other stuff. But they nailed the diagnosis correctly, but it was 2 more years before I got on the right medication and was able to sort of get my life together. So ended up retiring from the Army. I went from bad to worse, continued to spiral down, deeper depression. I was hospitalized for a lengthy period at a VA hospital. And it wasn't until 10 years ago that I got prescribed lithium. And it was remarkable that within days, less than a week, the depression lifted, the psychosis pretty much went away, energy came back, the will to live, which had been gone for 2 years. I mean, I literally every day wanted to die. Um, I had passive suicidal ideations, continuous visions of my own death. Um, Fortunately, I never did take my life, but so I was in a really bad place. The lithium set a base 10 years ago, though, where my brain stabilized, and then I was able to start to rebuild my life and start to recover. But it took a while and a lot of work to in order to get there. I think the first step was we made a key decision to move from New Hampshire to Florida for the sunshine, the brightness, the warmth, all that. So we came here, um, and then I had to kind of rebuild the family, marriage, relationships, and start physical fitness. I mean, I lost a ton of muscle and body strength during the 2 years of depression. So I started to kind of rebuild myself. And, the medications were key. The therapy was critical. Healthy living, really good. My wife and I have a pretty strict Mediterranean diet, which is, works for us. I mean, I work out like all the time, every day. I mean, I'm working out for 1 to 2 hours every day, doing all kinds of activities. Um, Low stress. Oh, the 8 hours of sleep. Ooh, man, I try to guard that, and get that sleep and live a super healthy life. Then the purpose. I had to come up in the Army. I had a mission, a purpose every day for a career. But then I found, man, I don't have a purpose. What's my mission? What's my life about? Why? Like, what's the purpose of all this? And, talked to people, read books, prayed, and it came to me kind of like a message from God. It was like, okay, Greg, look what you just went through. You are alive. You have a new life. Your purpose is to turn, all that stuff, suffering into something positive and share it with other people to help them. And so I came up with my purpose, moved to Florida, developed a network of people, happy, fun, energetic people who, were positive. And by the way, I shared with all of my Cocoa Beach friends, all my friends, hey, I have bipolar disorder. Here's the deal. Here's what it looks like. If you see me going into mania or depression, come talk to me, talk to Maggie, be a battle buddy, be a peer support person, help me out. And so all my friends in Cocoa Beach all do that. So that was kind of part of the recovery. But then, I mean, there's just plain perseverance that because I still have dips into depression. I have blips into hypomania, and I understand and recognize them. And I have methods and techniques. My therapist has been incredibly helpful. She's a psychologist in giving me techniques and methods to keep the hypomania from going too high and to pull out of the depressions. So the persistence and the perseverance is key. And then another thing, and I call these the 5 Ps: purpose, people, place, perseverance. And then the last one is perspective. I mean, everybody is dealing with something. Okay, so bipolar was my thing. A lot of people have cancer. They have other, heart disease, whatever, diabetes. And so, keep things in perspective, be grateful for what you have, and, make the most out of your life. That's kind of my structure. And then I have a daily structure, wake up at the same time. Get up. I like coffee. I do my morning grounding, prayer, gratefulness, meditation, journaling. I mean, I do that every day. Go get your workout, go to the gym, ride your bike, do a beach walk, what a swim, lift weights. And then I have a routine all during the day. And then I have time blocked, especially in the late afternoon, evening for like with Maggie, where we're together and we kind of, bond and she's important and all that kind of thing. And then go to bed and hopefully, lights out at the same time, do the sleep hygiene routine, calm down, relax, deep breathing, eye mask, earplugs, dark, cold room. And so that's kind of my life. That's what I do.
That's great. Yeah, so many those routines can really make a difference. You mentioned, of course, your wife Maggie, and your children, and how they were so important to your recovery as well. Can you talk a little bit more about your family and how they help you to stay well, how you help them to stay well as well?
Yes. So we are all, I'm an open book. I mean, you've see, I wrote a book. And so we're all very open and honest with each other. We share experiences with techniques, medications, etc. Maggie knows me and our two boys with bipolar, very, very well. We talk about our mood, how we're doing, what the signals and signs and symptoms are. We are open with each other. If we see something, we just say, "Hey, I'm seeing this," you know, and it takes a little bit of a journey to get to the point where people don't take it as an attack or an insult or you're threatening me or that kind of thing. We're really, really open. So I tell Maggie and my sons what I'm feeling, my moods. They give feedback. We do that with each other. Maggie's very good. She knows a lot about bipolar from having experienced it with me and the two kids. Um, she's supportive, interested, helpful, but she does it in a pretty nice, helpful, positive way that's not aggressive or insulting or um, negative. So that's really helpful. And I'll give you an example of how this has really helped. So I got two sons. One of them, or with bipolar, one of them, crisis, really dealt with it super professionally. I mean, went to the doctor. He's done all the right things. He works hard at it. He's improved. He's healthier. He's done all the right stuff. Kind of textbook. The other son is an artist. He's a starving artist. And he saw the doctor like a long time ago, took meds for a while, got tired of it all, and for a number of years has just he walked away from professional medicine and just self-medicated on marijuana and alcohol, which is disastrous. And we were able to talk to him in a very compassionate, caring way. And his new wife is also really supportive. We were able to say, hey, look, alcohol and drugs are going to make you worse. Look at how your life has been. Look at your life compared to your brother's life. And through our kind of family peer support group, we were able to connect him with a, good psychiatrist who then connected him with a therapist. And so he is now in working with medical professionals, taking medication, doing the right stuff, has a supportive, young new wife, and he's doing better. So I mean, I'm really grateful for that.
It sounds like you communicate really well together, which is just beautiful and so important, if you're living with a mood disorder to be comfortable in those
Mhm.
conversations.
Yes, open, honest, candid conversation, I think is really key. The other thing,
Absolutely.
Caroline, it's so awesome. So I've got my favorite activity in Cocoa Beach is I've been taking these dancing classes and they're a blast. They're super fun and energetic. I mean, the music's great, the dancing is fun, the people are lively. Um, and so that's like a core group of great friends locally in town. And like I mentioned earlier, they've all read my book. They'll watch, like once I get the link for this talk tonight, they'll watch it and give me critique, like, how I did, what I could have said better. Um, but they all know, I gave them little cards on, okay, here's what mania looks like. Here's what depression looks like. If you see that those things in me, please come tell me. I won't be insulted, and it'll help me stay healthy, and on the right track. And if you don't think I'm listening or adapting, talk to Maggie or just talk to her also. And it's been really, really good. I think this group of friends I have, they think it's really cool that I'm like open and told the bipolar story. They like it and respect it.
That is very cool. Yeah. Um, this has been so transformative for you, but in the military, it's not exactly known for a place about being very open about mental health. So I was wondering, that must have been what were your thoughts in terms of sharing that openly? That must have taken some thought to do so.
So once I got the diagnosis, I got fired from my job, and then I got the diagnosis. So during that interim period, I was still on active duty. People knew like, oh man, what happened? What happened to Martin? Like this guy was a, super high performer and he got fired and we heard he has like some kind of mental problems. So that was sort of an uncomfortable period. I was in deep depression though, so I hardly ever came out of the house or didn't hardly talk to people. Then I got the diagnosis and I told everybody in the military, my chain of command and so forth, and where I lived, I said, hey, I got the diagnosis. It's bipolar disorder. And they were like, oh, wow. Like, they didn't even know, like, people don't really know what bipolar disorder is or what it means. They don't know. Um, then I went through the 2 years of terrible depression and I was hospitalized. And I was very open with my family and friends and people anybody in the military who I was still in touch with. I told openly. And then when I started the recovery 10 years ago, I said, I am not going to hide this. I am not embarrassed or ashamed or anything. This is a illness of my brain. It's invisible, but it's real. I feel like I'm on a mission from God to tell my story, help educate people, you know, stop the stigma, promote recovery, save lives, be transparent. And then I started writing short articles, and then I started speaking locally, like the Rotary Club, churches, little groups. They're always looking for speakers, and I would go in and tell my bipolar story. People were like, "Oh my gosh, this is wow, that's amazing!" And little outlets started publishing these little short 800 word articles. And then I wrote the manuscript for the book, and then I wrote a article that was published in 2021, so 5 years ago. This article, which was a condensation of the book before the book came out, Caroline, this is unbelievable. It was published in an online national security journal that's read like all over the world in military circles. This was the most widely read article in the history of that journal. They published it on a Monday, and by the end of the week, they had over 100,000 people had read it. And it just ricocheted all over the place. I got interviews on National Public Radio. They read the article. I started getting invited to speak at all kinds of things. And I then, from that point on, I mean, I was on a roll and momentum just built. And then the book. And I'm like completely um, unapologetic, transparent. I wouldn't say I'm militant, but I am very open and aggressive that I live with bipolar disorder, and it has made me more creative, compassionate. I'm a better person. I'm stronger. It helped me succeed. Then it kind of blew my life up, but I'm on this recovery mission, and I've spoken to thousands. I don't even know how many people I've spoken to, but thousands of military people, veterans groups, et cetera. They love it. And so it generates a lot of good discussion. And I would say that the military over the past 20 years has really improved a lot in its understanding and the way it deals with mental illness and mental health. It's way better now than it was 20 years ago, but they have a long way to go. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that are happening because of still a military culture that denies the reality that you can tough it out, just try harder, be a tougher soldier or Marine, and you can get through this. That is less today than it was 20 years ago, but it's still out there. And then you have the huge problem where, if people come forward with their mental health problem, how will that affect their career, their security clearance, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, yeah, I have just said my mission is to tell the story and let it fall where it will.
And we thank you so much for sharing it. That leads me to my last question before we open it up to some more questions from the audience, which is, if there's somebody in the room right now who's in the middle of their own version in whatever form it takes for them that you went through, what would you want them to know?
Number one, go seek professional medical help. I mean, go to the doctor. And when you go, take somebody with you who knows you well, a spouse, a family member, a good friend, a good work colleague or buddy, because what they can do is provide collateral information to the doctor. Like for me, it's interesting. I actually went to the doctor 6 times from when I came home from Iraq in 2004 up until I got finally diagnosed in 2014. 6 times the doctors evaluated me and said, "You're fine. There's nothing wrong with you." But they were wrong. And the problem is it's hard to see bipolar disorder, especially in someone who is successful. So when I would go into the doctor, they would see a colonel or a general with a PhD, combat, combat vet, and they just couldn't see bipolar disorder until I went and my wife came with me and I was in a terrible state of depression. And this is really, really important in your question. So I was in a wicked depression and I went to the doctor. This is my seventh time over a decade. And the doctor said, "Well, you're obviously depressed." And he would have diagnosed me with depression. But my wife said, "Doctor, you're right. He is depressed now, but before he was manic." And the doctor suddenly is like, "Whoa, okay, what do you mean by manic?" And Maggie described my mania. And then he said, "Oh my gosh, depression, mania, bipolar disorder," and he got the diagnosis right. But so I say, step one, if you're dealing with anything, go see a doctor and bring someone with you that can provide collateral information. Because when you're in depression, you don't, you can't, I couldn't talk. I couldn't articulate myself clearly because I was super depressed. And when I was in mania, I felt like Superman. I was like, I felt so great. There's nothing wrong with me. So anyway, go to the doctor. That's step one. Number two, accept and embrace the diagnosis. Don't deny it. Don't fight it. Don't hide from it. Just say, okay, I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. if you got a cancer diagnosis or a heart disease diagnosis, you wouldn't hide from it or shrink from it. You'd say, okay, thanks, doctor. I know I have this now. You can then, third thing is go learn all about the condition. So, like, I went to school, I have studied so much about bipolar disorder and learned everything I could, and then develop a strategy and then a battle plan, a strategy that's going to get you well over the long term, and then a battle plan for the day to day, life and grind and, being healthy and well. And then just don't give up, don't quit. And I've been back into some levels of depression during this 10-year journey. And, I've gone into depressions and it's not easy. It's really, really hard. It's horrible. And just don't quit. Stay with it. And I remember in the deepest, darkest depression, I thought I would never get better and that I just should die and everybody would be better off in the world without me. And a battle buddy said, Greg, don't give up. You are gonna recover. You are going to recover. Just don't quit. It's gonna start working for you. And he was right. And I just think that idea of hope and inspiration and hanging in there is absolutely key.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Greg, for being so open about your story. I know I learned a lot today. And I hope, the rest of us here in the audience have gotten something as well.